It was the kind of round that doesn't just change a leaderboard, it rewrites a narrative. The same fairways that mocked him a day earlier now echoed with cheers. And every birdie felt like a rebuttal to the doubt that had built overnight. What made it more powerful wasn't just the scorecard, but the composure behind it. Charlie Woods didn't look like a teenager reacting to pressure. He looked like a player processing it, converting frustration into focus. That 66 wasn't luck, it was evolution in real time. Sawgrass stopped being a stage 4 struggle and became proof that resilience isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about answering them louder than they echo. Each birdie wasn't just a number, it was a statement. Every putt dropped with the conviction of someone who'd had enough of the noise. You could see it in his posture. In the way he walked between shots, the stride of a player who wasn't trying to escape his father's shadow, but to cast his own. Sawgrass became his proving ground, a test he'd flunked one day and aced the next. And that contrast is what makes the story powerful. Because greatness isn't built on perfection. It's built on how fast you recover when the world expects you to fold. For Charlie Woods, round 2 wasn't redemption by accident. It was proof that he can take a punch, steady the hands, and swing back harder. But for Charlie Woods, every round is a referendum, a verdict on potential. Legacy and pressure that most pros never face, let alone teenagers. Sawgrass didn't just test his swing. It tested his resilience, his ability to rewrite the story mid-tournament when the world had already written him off. And he did it with precision that couldn't be faked. The second round 66 wasn't just a number. It was proof that his talent isn't theoretical. It's real, measurable, and loud enough to silence the doubt, at least for now. Whether it marks the start of something lasting or just a glimpse of what's coming, one truth is undeniable. Charlie Woods isn't playing to live up to a name anymore. He's playing to make his own impossible standard. For Charlie Woods, every round feels like a referendum on destiny rather than a day of golf. The shadow of Tiger isn't something he can escape. It walks the fairway beside him, shaping every headline and magnifying every swing. The crowd doesn't just watch him play. They measure him against history. A tug at his hat becomes a gesture of comparison. A single miss turns into a legacy debate. But beneath the noise, there's a kid trying to carve out something that's his, one shot at a time. Sawgrass reminded everyone how suffocating that microscope can be. Cheers for the birdies, gasps for the bogeys, and cameras waiting for a story, not a score. Yet that's what makes his journey fascinating. Because while most 16-year-olds are learning how to compete, Shirley is learning how to compete with expectation itself. It was a test of identity. A weekend where golf became more than just a game, it became a mirror. Every swing reflected not only his skill, but the expectations that trail his last name. The junior players wasn't about chasing a trophy. It was about proving he could stand tall beneath the weight of one of sport's heaviest shadows. Each birdie was defiance, each mistake a reminder that the climb is far from over. But through it all, Charlie showed flashes of something that can't be coached or inherited: resilience. He didn't crumble under pressure. He adapted, learned, and answered back. The story of Charlie Woods isn't about becoming the next Tiger. It's about becoming the first Charlie. And Sawgrass may just have been the place where that transformation quietly began. It was more than just a tournament. It was a message. 3 days that captured everything about being young, talented, and relentlessly scrutinized. There were mistakes, moments of brilliance, and lessons that can't be learned without struggle. At only 16, a top 10 finish at Sawgrass should have been celebrated, yet it became another round of judgment. But greatness isn't built in a single week. It's forged through time, setbacks, and growth. For Charlie Woods, this was one chapter in a story still being written, not the final word. The expectations will follow him, the pressure will grow, but pressure can do two things: it can crush you or create you. And if this week proved anything, that Charlie Woods isn't backing down. Pressure can destroy or define, and which path Charlie Woods takes will shape the rest of his journey. The road ahead stretches far beyond sawgrass through junior circuits, amateur battles, college golf, and eventually the professional arena. What he builds now is not a career-ending moment, but a foundation for something far greater. Missing a Ryder Cup spot might sting, but finishing ninth at 16 against elite competition is not failure, it's proof of potential. The story of Charlie Woods isn't about instant greatness. It's about growth under fire, learning to turn weight into strength. The world may rush to judge, but time is the ultimate truth-teller. In the end, greatness isn't measured by headlines, it's written in the years that follow. The bigger question isn't whether Charlie Woods can become another Tiger Woods, it's whether he even needs to. Golf doesn't need a replica. It needs authenticity. It needs Charlie. Because the sport's future isn't written in the shadow of its past. It's written by those bold enough to step out of it. The junior players. Championship wasn't just a tournament. It was a statement. A stumble, a surge, and a stumble again. All within 3 days that captured what it means to grow up under a microscope. The setbacks hurt, but the flashes of brilliance remind us this story isn't finished. It's only beginning. At 16, a top 10 at Sawgrass should be celebrated, not dissected. Because greatness isn't built overnight, it's built through chapters. Through failures, through quiet resilience that doesn't trend, but endures. Charlie Woods doesn't need to become Tiger. He just needs to become Charlie. And if these past few days are any indication, that might be more than enough. And make no mistake, pressure will continue to stalk him. Every tee shot will carry the weight of expectation. Every leaderboard position a verdict on his future. But pressure has two faces. It can suffocate or it can forge something stronger. Which one Charlie chooses will define his path forward. Pressure can break or sharpen. The journey ahead is long. And on another stage, the world's #1 golfer, Scottie Scheffler, stood on the pristine grass of Bethpage Black, facing a very different kind of pressure, not from his swing, but from the crowd itself. The 2025 Ryder Cup, meant to celebrate golf's finest, had unraveled into chaos. As American fans hurled abuse at Rory McIlroy, Scheffler did the unthinkable. He turned to his own countrymen and asked for silence, for respect. It was a rare act of courage in a sport built on composure. A quiet stand that exposed something far deeper. A culture cracking under its own weight. The world saw not just a game under fire, but a mirror held up to golf itself. The build-up to this moment of reckoning had been a slow burn, a season-long test of dominance and restraint. Scottie Scheffler had been untouchable on the course, but increasingly at odds with the world around him. Earlier in 2025, he conquered Royal Portrush to win the Open Championship on foreign soil, a monumental victory overshadowed by hostility. The local crowds, fiercely devoted to Rory McIlroy, turned every hole into a gauntlet of jeers and venom. Scheffler, ever composed, brushed it off with quiet honesty. People have a tendency to say things that are dumb, but the moment lingered. It was a taste of something darker creeping into the game. Tribalism, fandom turned warfare, where cheering for one player meant tearing down another. And through it all, Scheffler was expected to endure, to smile, to absorb it, to keep playing while the sport he loved began to fracture around him. But Scheffler filed it away, a quiet injustice that would soon find its echo. Then came the BMW Championship at Caves Valley. Another trophy in a season that felt unstoppable. He won by 4 shots, a display of dominance that seemed effortless. But even in victory, friction lingered. During the 3rd round, Scheffler and his playing partner, Robert McIntyre, were put on the clock for slow play, a warning Scheffler later described as frustrating. It was a subtle reminder of control, The PGA's stopwatch never blinked, even for its brightest star. While they micromanaged pace and presentation, a much larger problem was quietly growing, one they either couldn't see or refused to confront. That problem erupted at the Ryder Cup. Bethpage Black, New York golf's most hostile arena, a cathedral of chaos. The crowd lived up to its reputation. Every hole, every swing, every word from the European side was met with venom. Rory McIlroy became the prime target, showered with jeers and insults that crossed the line from competitive to cruel, and right in the middle stood Scottie Scheffler. The man who had endured the same kind of abuse months earlier was now watching it happen to his rival. But instead of ignoring it, he did the unthinkable. He tried to calm his own supporters, motioning for them to stop. And then came the moment that defined it all. His father, standing in the crowd, personally confronted a heckler who had gone too far. A simple act of decency in a sea of hostility. His mother, too, earned praise for her composure, grace amid chaos. The world's #1 golfer, at the peak of his power, was relying on his parents to restore order at an event run by the most powerful organization in golf. The PGA of America issued warnings, but they were whispers in a hurricane. The truth was undeniable. The system had failed so completely that a player's family had to step in where officials would not. The admission was small in words, but massive in weight. When even the captain concedes the crowd went too far, it strips away the last defense of denial. What happened at Bethpage wasn't an isolated lapse in decorum. It was the culmination of something that had been building for years. The U.S. players themselves issued a formal apology to their European counterparts, a moment that felt both necessary and surreal. They weren't apologizing for their play, but for their own supporters. That, more than anything, showed how fractured the bond between fans and players had become. The Ryder Cup, once a celebration of pride and rivalry, now stood as a reflection of something uglier, a sport grappling with its own reflection and realizing it might not like what it sees. Scottie Scheffler never set out to be a reformer, but his actions at Bethpage have forced golf into a reckoning it can no longer avoid. In defending his rival and defying his own crowd, he exposed a truth the PGA could no longer hide behind polished broadcasts and marketing slogans that the soul of the sport is slipping beneath the noise. His gesture of restraint became a roar for change, a reminder that dignity still matters even in a world obsessed with spectacle. Now, as the governing bodies face mounting pressure to restore order and integrity, Scheffler stands as an unlikely symbol of what golf once was and what it must become again. The next Ryder Cup won't just be about fairways and flags. It'll be a test of whether the game can reclaim its character before the noise consumes it completely. Game. What Scheffler did at Bethpage was more than a gesture. It was a stand for principle in a sport that has too often hidden behind politeness. By choosing respect over rage and integrity over image, he reminded everyone what golf was meant to represent. In a season defined by dominance, his most defining moment didn't come from a trophy, but from the courage to confront his own crowd. That quiet act of defiance may have done more for the game's future than any birdie ever could. Because in the end, greatness isn't just measured by scorecards, it's measured by standards.